You're single and living alone in a 3-story house overlooking the Pacific. Of course the family should be able to use it, right? My younger sister, Kristen, said it without a shred of guilt, swirling a glass of champagne as if she were already the lady of the manor. Her voice cut through the cheerful hum of relatives like a blade wrapped in velvet. Today was my 30th birthday. This $1.2 million cliffside villa, secured after a decade of 18-hour days, sleepless nights, and 3 failed startups before my fintech company finally hit, was supposed to be a monument to independence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the endless gray-blue of the California coast. A minimalist kitchen with Italian marble. A library I'd built myself, shelf by shelf. Silence. Every detail screamed mine. And yet, as Kristen stood before me in a sequined dress she clearly hadn't paid for, her eyes held no respect. Only a sticky, possessive hunger. She strutted across the reclaimed oak floors, heels clicking like judgment. Hey, Denise, your company's valuation doubled last quarter, right? Managing this place all alone must be such a burden. I'll live here for you. No rent, obviously. We're family. The room froze. My Aunt Margaret stopped mid-bite of a canopy. My cousin Leo's forced laugh died in his throat. Kristen's voice was unnecessarily loud, as if she were announcing a verdict. I set my glass down slowly. The clink echoed. Kristen, stop. This is my house, not a timeshare. Before she could retort, my father, Robert, stepped into the center of the living room. He was 62, still broad-shouldered, with the kind of commanding presence that once made him a mid-level executive before early retirement bored him into bitterness. He looked down at me, actually looked down, though I was taller, and said, "Denise, watch your tone. Kristen is your sister. She's struggling to launch her new apparel line. In this family, those who succeed help those who haven't yet. That's always been our principle." My mother, Susan, materialized at his side, a silk scarf knotted at her throat, her smile thin as a razor. That's right, sweetheart. Family supports family. Don't you think keeping a house this big all to yourself is a little selfish? I stared at them. Selfish. The word landed like a slap. Every cent of the down payment, $300,000, had come from my own escrow account. Every mortgage payment had been auto-deducted from my business account for 4 years. This house was mine, bought with blood and burnout. Mom, Dad, I said quietly, this house is my sanctuary. I won't let anyone trample through it. Family or not. My father's face turned the color of raw steak. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket with trembling fingers and announced to the 30 guests, "Fine. If that's how you want it, the party's over. Everyone leave. Denise, brace yourself. My lawyer will be here shortly. I'll straighten out the legal rights to this house today." Relatives began setting down their plates. Whispers skittered like cockroaches. My 30th birthday, the first real celebration I'd allowed myself in years, was unraveling into a public execution. But instead of crying or screaming, I felt a strange pressure building behind my ribs. Not rage. Laughter. Desperate, almost hysterical laughter I had to choke back. As the CEO of a fintech startup, I'd reviewed hundreds of contracts, negotiated with venture capitalists, and sued a former partner for intellectual property theft. The idea that my father, retired middle manager with no legal training, could somehow straighten out a house I owned outright was absurd. I turned my back on them and walked to the kitchen island. I poured a glass of chilled Perrier, took a long sip, and let the carbonation clear my head. "Hey, Denise, didn't you hear?" Kristen called after me, triumphant. "Dad's serious." She followed me to the kitchen, leaning against the counter like she already lived there. She was 26, unemployed for 3 years, having burned through the family's remaining savings under the banner of finding herself. Now she gazed dreamily at the illuminated infinity pool outside the window. "This place has 4 guest rooms, right?" she said. "And that walk-in closet in the master. It's bigger than my current apartment. It'd be perfect for my samples. You're always working anyway. You just need a place to sleep. The smallest room upstairs, the one with the dormer window, that's plenty for you. The rest of the space should be used effectively by the family. That's just rational. I didn't put my glass down. I glanced at her sideways. You might want to check whether your definition of rational matches what's in the dictionary. Kristen, I'm not giving an inch. At that, my mother approached with a theatrical sigh. She reached for my shoulder, but I stepped aside smoothly. Denise, don't be so stubborn, she said, her voice dripping with performative tenderness. Living alone in a space this big, that's lonely. If Kristen lives with you, it'll be lively. She can learn about business by watching you. It's a win-win. Are you really going to reject your family's love? Has success made your heart that cold? Family's love. I laughed out loud. It was not a happy sound. Riding on someone else's success to live rent-free in an upscale neighborhood isn't love, Mom. It's parasitism. The silence that followed was unbearable. The relative stares drilled into me. Unable to stand it, my mother forced an awkward smile and grabbed my arm harder this time. Everyone's watching. Let's not argue here. Why don't we step into the hallway? If we talk quietly as a family, I'm sure you'll understand. I allowed myself to be led out of the living room. My father followed. Kristen brought up the rear, still smirking. We moved into the wide, marble-floored hallway that connected the main wing to the guest wing. The moment we left the noise of the party behind, a certain smell tickled my nose. It was completely different from the aromas of roasted lamb and expensive red wine drifting from the dining room. It was Kristen's perfume. Cheap, cloying, sweet, gardenia and synthetic vanilla. But this wasn't the faint trace of someone standing beside me. This was ingrained. Heavy. As if it had been seeping out from the upstairs residential area for days. A bad feeling shot through me like ice water in my veins. I sprinted up the stairs to the second floor. Denise, where do you think you're going? My mother shrieked. I ignored her. I flung open the door to the largest guest suite, a room with vaulted ceilings, a king-sized bed, and a western view of the ocean. And I stopped breathing. The room had been colonized. Gaudy, familiar suitcases lay open on the floor. From the closet spilled Kristen's clothes, sequin tops, cheap leather pants, a pile of designer knockoffs. Her handbags, at least 6 of them, were tossed onto the bed. Cosmetics covered the dresser, foundation stains on the marble, a dozen lipstick tubes uncapped and drying out. An ironing board was set up in the corner with half-finished samples of her apparel line. Poorly stitched blouses with crooked tags. This is what exactly? I whispered. Kristen appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. Something glinted in her palm. A sleek, dark key card with a magnetic strip, a duplicate of the high-security smart key I'd commissioned from a specialty locksmith in San Francisco. Keys that were supposed to be impossible to copy without biometric authorization. Another. My father carrying 2 bottles from the wine cellar, each worth over $800, and muttering to Kristen, once we establish facts on the ground, she won't dare kick us out. She'll worry too much about appearances. The audio was crystal clear. Kristen's mocking voice echoed through the room. This house is ours. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the relatives. My Aunt Margaret covered her mouth. My Uncle David shook his head slowly, disgust etched into his features. I can't believe this, one of my cousins whispered. They planned it. I turned to the officers. They deliberately entered my home while I was away, damaged my property, consumed expensive alcohol, and attempted to establish tenancy without my consent. Even now, their belongings remain in my guest suite. This is a clear violation of California Penal Code Sections 459 and 484. Faced with the irrefutable evidence on the screen, Morris dropped his fountain pen. He didn't even try to pick it up. He just stepped backward, putting distance between himself and my father. Robert, he said quietly, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do here. Before any legal advice can be given, clear evidence of criminal activity has been made public. If I stay, my own license could be at risk. He left. The front door closed behind him with a soft, damning click. The sergeant stepped directly in front of my father. Mr. Parker, we've reviewed the footage. You stated that you made the key to manage your daughter's house. But the videos show you browsing through her jewelry, consuming expensive alcohol, and discussing a plan to create a fait accompli so she couldn't kick you out. This goes beyond management. This is premeditated trespassing and theft. My mother wrapped an arm around Kristen's shoulders and looked at me with the kind of pity one reserves for a tragic villain. Denise, Kristen is preparing to launch her apparel brand using this house as her base of operations. Having an address in this neighborhood will give her credibility with suppliers. Do you really have the right to crush your sister's dream over something as trivial as square footage? I looked at each of them in turn. My father, smug on my chaise lounge. My mother, performing maternal concern like a B-movie actress. My sister, trembling with righteous anger. They genuinely believed my house was shared property. In their minds, my success equaled the family's collective victory. My bank account was their emergency fund. My house was their vacation home. My life was a resource to be extracted. An utterly misplaced logic. But something shifted in me at that moment. The anger didn't disappear, it distilled. It became clear and cold, like alcohol freezing into something harder. Words would never reach these people. Neither logic nor tears would survive their filter of greed. Everything I said would be twisted into the selfish refusal of an ungrateful daughter. Fine, I said quietly. You called a lawyer, Dad? Then let's discuss this with a third party present. My father nodded, satisfied. You should have said that from the start. I already called my friend, Attorney Morris. He specializes in real estate disputes. He'll give you a proper lecture on how legally meaningless your possessiveness really is. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen. Dozens of notifications waited for me. Alerts from the hidden cameras I'd installed throughout the house, discreet, high-definition lenses disguised as smoke detectors and light fixtures. The logs went back several days. Yes, I already knew. While I was away in Austin, negotiating a merger, they had entered my house repeatedly. They had slept in my guest room. They had drunk from my wine cellar 2 bottles of a 2012 vintage I'd been saving for a special occasion. My mother had tried on my jewelry. My father had gone through my home office, rifling through papers he had no business seeing. The reason I had deliberately invited the entire extended family to this housewarming party, including my mother's sister, my father's brother, and 4 cousins, was for this moment. Hey, Kristen, I said, turning to face her. That spare key you found at Mom and Dad's place? Did you really think I left it there by accident? Her triumphant smile froze. What are you talking about? You're just careless. No, it was bait. I let the words hang in the air. I knew from the beginning that you'd copy it. I knew you'd start invading my house while I was away. Anticipating risks several moves ahead, that's what I do as a CEO. Your greed is easier to read than a bug-ridden spreadsheet. My father shot to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. This was all a setup? From the very beginning. Exactly, Dad. I didn't gather all the relatives here today to celebrate my new house. I invited them so that, in front of a crowd of witnesses with no escape, every single one of them could watch you dig your own grave. I walked toward the door, then paused, looking back over my shoulder. This party was a trap. A perfectly designed one. And you walked right into it. I descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, my heels clicking like a countdown. When I returned to the living room, the relatives were still there, 30 people frozen in awkward silence, unsure whether to stay or flee. My Aunt Margaret was whispering to my cousin Leo. My Uncle David, my father's older brother, looked physically ill. A moment later, the doorbell rang. It was Attorney Morris, my father's longtime friend, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who had handled my parents' refinancing and once helped my cousin avoid a DUI. He stepped inside with his leather briefcase, surveying the room with the practiced neutrality of a hired gun. Robert, he said, shaking my father's hand, calling me out on your daughter's birthday night? This doesn't sound like a peaceful situation. My father clapped him on the shoulder. Morris, as you can see, my daughter is behaving in an utterly inhumane way toward her own family. I want you to clarify the ownership of this house and proceed with the legal steps necessary so the family can rightfully use it. Morris turned to me with a condescending smile, the kind lawyers reserve for children and the elderly. Denise, I've heard the situation from your father. You're single, you're hoarding an enormous asset while denying access to family members in need. That could be interpreted as contrary to the spirit of the law. Let's resolve this amicably. We'll draft a contract recognizing certain rooms as Kristen's residence and place of business. That's best for everyone. I didn't even glance at the document he tried to hand me. Instead, I checked the time on my phone. 8:47 p.m. Mr. Morris, I appreciate the offer. But before we draft any contracts, there's a physical problem that needs to be addressed first. A physical problem? The sharp wail of a siren cut through the night. One car, then two, then three. Blue and red lights flooded the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the living room in stroboscopic color. What the hell is this? My father shouted, rushing to the window. Outside, 3 police cruisers had blocked the driveway. Armed officers were stepping out, speaking into shoulder microphones. Denise, tell me you didn't call the police, my mother whispered, her face pale. I did. I reported suspected trespassing, unlawful occupation of assets, and theft over $9,500. A heavy knock on the front door. I walked over and opened it calmly, welcoming 2 officers inside, a tall woman with a buzz cut and a stocky man with a sergeant's chevrons. Thank you for coming, I said. I'm Denise Parker, the one who filed the report. The affected areas are the master bedroom walk-in closet, the guest suite on the 2nd floor, the wine cellar, and my home office. Wait, this is a mistake. My father pushed forward, his face florid. I'm the homeowner's father. This is just a family dispute. There's no need for police involvement. This lawyer can explain. The sergeant held up a hand. Sir, according to the report, your daughter's security system detected intrusion using an unauthorized duplicate key. There's evidence of repeated unlawful entry over several days. We'll need to inspect the premises. Morris, the attorney, had gone very still. He was staring at the officers, then at my father, then at me, calculating his own exposure. Everyone, I said, raising my voice just enough to carry. Let me show you something. I mirrored my phone's screen to the 80-inch monitor in the living room. The relatives gasped as the display lit up with clear, night vision footage. Timestamps in the corner read 3 days prior. The video showed my father unlocking the front door with the copied key card. Kristen followed, dragging a suitcase. My mother came last, carrying a garment bag. They moved through the house like they owned it. Another clip, Kristen dancing in my living room, drinking champagne directly from the bottle. Another, my mother opening my jewelry box, trying on a diamond tennis bracelet and laughing as she posed for a selfie. Another, my father carrying 2 bottles from the wine cellar, each worth over $800, and muttering to Kristen, once we establish facts on the ground, she won't dare kick us out. She'll worry too much about appearances. The audio was crystal clear. Kristen's mocking voice echoed through the room. This house is ours. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the relatives. My Aunt Margaret covered her mouth. My Uncle David shook his head slowly, disgust etched into his features. I can't believe this, one of my cousins whispered. They planned it. I turned to the officers. They deliberately entered my home while I was away, damaged my property, consumed expensive alcohol, and attempted to establish tenancy without my consent. Even now, their belongings remain in my guest suite. This is a clear violation of California Penal Code Sections 459 and 484. Faced with the irrefutable evidence on the screen, Morris dropped his fountain pen. He didn't even try to pick it up. He just stepped backward, putting distance between himself and my father. Robert, he said quietly, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do here. Before any legal advice can be given, clear evidence of criminal activity has been made public. If I stay, my own license could be at risk. He left. The front door closed behind him with a soft, damning click. The sergeant stepped directly in front of my father. Mr. Parker, we've reviewed the footage. You stated that you made the key to manage your daughter's house. But the videos show you browsing through her jewelry, consuming expensive alcohol, and discussing a plan to create a fait accompli so she couldn't kick you out. This goes beyond management. This is premeditated trespassing and theft. That was freedom of speech, my father sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. Obviously, it was a joke. The sergeant didn't blink. We'll let a judge decide that. Another officer stopped Kristen as she tried to slip upstairs. Miss, what's in that bag? Nothing. These are my clothes. But when the officer asked her to open it, her hands shook. Inside were my designer accessories. A Cartier watch, a pair of diamond studs, and 3 unopened luxury skincare products worth over $2,000 total. These were supposed to be gifts, Kristen protested, her voice shrill. Denise has more than she could ever use. The bags would be happier if I used them. My Aunt Margaret finally snapped. How shameless are you, Kristen? Have you ever once thought about how hard Denise worked for any of this? The officers were methodical. They took statements. They photographed the guest suite. They collected the copied key card as evidence. Miss Parker, the sergeant said to me, will proceed with filing the formal report. Please submit the access logs and surveillance footage to our server. I operated my device. The data synchronized instantly to the officer's tablet, every lock event, every camera clip, every timestamp. As the CEO of a fintech company, my home security was built on a level far beyond an ordinary household. Biometric locks. AI motion detection. Redundant cloud storage. This is flawless evidence, the sergeant said, nodding. Based on trespassing, theft, and property damage, and considering the total value of the losses, this qualifies as a felony in California. Robert, Susan, and Kristen Parker, you are to vacate this property immediately. Any resistance will result in arrest on the spot. Arrest, my mother wailed, collapsing into tears. It's nighttime. We have nowhere to go. The officer showed no mercy. You should have considered that before you copied a key and moved in without permission. Under the contemptuous stares of every relative in the room, my father, my mother, and my sister were escorted toward the front door. Kristen screamed until the very end, "This is all your fault, Denise. You're just cheap. You've always been cheap." Her voice was swallowed by the wail of sirens as the patrol cars pulled away. After the storm passed, only silence remained. The relatives began to drift toward the door, but my Uncle David stopped in front of me. He was a quiet man, a high school principal who had never taken sides in family disputes. "Denise," he said, gripping my shoulder, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this bad. None of us did. You did the right thing." My Aunt Margaret nodded. "If you ever need anything, help with the house, a reference, anything, call us. We're on your side." One by one, they left with words of encouragement. When the last car pulled out of the driveway, I stood alone in the center of my living room and looked around. Kristen's luggage. My father's empty wine glasses. My mother's lipstick stains on a guest towel. The traces of their invasion were everywhere. "Time to clean," I murmured. I opened my banking app. Every month, automatic payments had been deducted from my account for my father's luxury sedan, my mother's SUV, and Kristen's phone bill. Gifts from a successful daughter, paid out of goodwill. That goodwill was now gone. I canceled every single automatic payment without hesitation. The next morning, I received a call from the sergeant. "Ms. Parker, the district attorney's office has reviewed the evidence. They've determined that this qualifies as first-degree residential burglary and grand theft. Arrest warrants for your father, your mother, and your sister will be formally issued today." I felt no sadness when I heard those words. What I felt instead was a cold, clinical sense of completion. The same feeling I got when a difficult merger closed or a bug was finally patched out of production. 3 days later, I was in my office, watching a video my lawyer had sent. It showed my family being arrested in front of their own rental house. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, phones out. My father shouted over and over, "This is my daughter's harassment. I'm innocent." My mother collapsed in tears, covering her face. Kristen thrashed wildly, resisting the officers until they pinned her against a patrol car. The people who had once seen me as nothing more than a wallet were now facing the consequences of their own choices. That scene was the best birthday present I could have asked for. That afternoon, accompanied by my lawyer, I went to the detention center. I wasn't there to offer forgiveness. I was there to deliver an ultimatum. Behind the thick acrylic partition, my father looked 10 years older. His hair was disheveled. He wore the same wrinkled shirt from the night of the party. When he saw me, he lunged toward the glass. "Denise, withdraw the charges immediately. This is a family matter. Kristen is remorseful, she's young. If she gets a criminal record, her life is over." I stared straight into his eyes. "You still don't understand. I didn't call the police because you visited. I called them because you systematically tried to destroy my boundaries, my privacy, and my home. Before you worry about Kristen's future, why didn't you stop her from stealing $30,000 worth of my belongings?" "That's because she wanted them. As her sister, it was natural for you to give them." Natural. That single word extinguished the last trace of attachment I had left. "Natural is what brought you here," I said. "Before I turned 30, did you ever once say happy birthday without asking for something? When I built this company, did you ever acknowledge the effort? All you ever calculated was how much easier your lives would become if you could just take." I stood up. "I've stopped paying your car loans. Your vehicles will be repossessed by the end of the week. I will never be your safety net again." "Denise, wait." I left without looking back. Outside, the sun was dazzling. I felt lighter than I had in decades. Like a chain I'd been dragging since childhood had finally snapped. A few weeks later, I returned to my villa. The chaos of that night had been erased by professional cleaners. I upgraded the security system. Vein authentication on the front door, bulletproof glass on all ground floor windows, AI-powered cameras that could distinguish between a family member and a stranger with 99.9% accuracy. I also obtained a restraining order barring my parents and sister from coming within 500 yards of me. They would never again enter my field of vision. At trial, my father and Kristen were convicted of first-degree residential burglary and grand theft. My mother was found guilty as an accomplice. Because it was their first offense and they accepted the restitution I demanded, every penny of the stolen goods, plus damages, they avoided prison. They received suspended sentences and 5 years of probation. But their lives were permanently branded. Convicted felons. With criminal records, they couldn't find stable work. According to relatives, they were forced out of their rental house and now live in a cramped apartment in Bakersfield, thin walls. Mold in the bathroom, constant arguments. They go around crying that Denise abandoned us. Not a single relative believes them. Every one of them witnessed what happened that night. Now my father and Kristen spend their days doing manual labor at a warehouse, hauling cardboard boxes in thermal suits. My mother works checkout at a discount store. They text me sometimes angry, pleading, manipulative. I don't read them. My lawyer handles all communication. Tonight, the same California starry sky stretches endlessly outside my window. Alone, but never lonely. I raise a glass of the wine they didn't manage to steal, a 2012 Bordeaux, saved for the right moment. To my 31-year-old self, I say into the silence, freedom is the greatest gift. What I gained on my 30th birthday wasn't a $1.2 million villa. It was my own life. And no one will ever threaten it again.